I never stepped into marriage thinking it would be fireworks every night. I knew things would calm down eventually. Life fills up fast, work, bills, family, stress. I understood that part. What I wasn't ready for was how love can quietly fade into silence. My name's Ethan. I'm 42. I'd been married to Lauren for 13 years. Well, I guess I should say I used to be married. Still getting used to saying that out loud. When we met, Lauren had this magnetic energy, outgoing, witty, always smiling. I wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but I was steady. I worked in carpentry, drove my own truck, paid my bills, kept my life in order. She once told me she admired that, said I was dependable. The first few years we were inseparable, not just in the physical sense, but emotionally too. We'd stay up late watching movies, take spontaneous weekend road trips, send each other teasing texts during the day. That spark was real. But somewhere around year 6 or 7, I started noticing small changes. She didn't laugh at my jokes anymore. Not because they were bad, but because it felt like she wasn't even hearing them. She'd come home from work, drop her bag, say she was exhausted, and sit on the couch scrolling on her phone. If I came up behind her and kissed her neck, she'd tense up, like my touch was a bother. At first, I told myself she was just under pressure. Her job at the school had become more demanding. Late meetings, extra paperwork, she came home drained. I didn't complain. I made dinner, did the laundry, even ran her bath some nights so she could relax. I thought showing love would make the love come back. It didn't. It got worse. The kisses became quick pecks on the cheek. The hugs turned into one-arm side squeezes. The bedroom turned into a desert. One night, I gently said, "I miss us." She gave me a weak smile and replied, "I'm just not in the mood lately. It's not you." But lately turned into months. I wasn't chasing fireworks. I just wanted to feel wanted, to feel like a man in my own home. But every time I reached out, whether with a compliment, a touch, or even just a look, I'd get shut down. And not softly, the kind of rejection that makes you feel invisible. Once I planned a whole weekend trip to a lakeside cabin, packed everything, rented the place, thinking maybe fresh air would help us reconnect. We sat by the fire under the stars, just the two of us, and she spent most of the night texting her sister or watching short videos. Later, when I tried to pull her close, she said, "Can you not? I just want to be left alone." That one cut deep. After that trip, I stopped trying so hard. Not because I stopped caring, but because the rejection was wearing me down. It's strange how a person can be sitting right next to you on the couch and still feel miles away. Lauren was there physically, but her mind, her energy, those were somewhere else entirely. I started spending more time in the garage, fixing old furniture, sanding wood, listening to the radio. It was peaceful in a way. No tension, no walking on eggshells, but it also felt like hiding. I didn't know how to talk to her anymore without it turning into an argument or an awkward silence. Our conversations became purely functional. Grocery lists, bills, who's picking up the dry cleaning. Even dinners at home were quiet. She'd scroll her phone. I'd stare at my plate. Sometimes I'd try to ask about her day, but she'd give me short answers, like she was ticking off a box before getting back to whatever she was doing. One night, I stayed late at work finishing a custom cabinet for a client. When I walked in, she was on the couch, laughing at something on her phone. I asked what was so funny, and she just said, "Oh, nothing you'd get." That stung more than I expected. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she didn't even look up. I started to wonder if there was someone else. Not necessarily another man, though that thought crossed my mind, but maybe another life. A version of herself that didn't include me. I saw her smiling more at her phone than at me. And it's a dangerous thing when you start noticing where your partner's joy actually goes. One Saturday morning, I suggested we go to the farmer's market like we used to. She said she had errands. I offered to go with her, and she replied, "It's fine, I'd rather just do them alone." It wasn't a fight, just another closed door. By then, I'd memorized the look on her face when she didn't want me around. It was subtle, a small shift in her eyes, a slight tightening of her jaw, but it was enough to make me step back every time. You can only push against a wall so many times before you stop pushing. And so I learned to keep to myself. I slept on the edge of the bed. I stopped reaching for her hand when we walked outside. I convinced myself that this was just how long marriages worked. Quiet, distant, maybe even a little cold. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just normal life. This was something breaking. The breaking point didn't come as some big dramatic fight. It was quieter than that, almost invisible if you weren't looking closely. One Tuesday evening, I came home early, thinking maybe we could have dinner together. I'd even stopped by her favorite bakery to pick up those chocolate tarts she loved. When I walked in, she was at the kitchen counter, sorting through mail. I put the box in front of her and said, "Thought you might like these." She glanced at it, gave a small smile, and said, "Thanks," before sliding the pastries to the side without opening them. We ate separately that night. Later, I found the box still untouched. Not angry, not forgotten, just ignored. It hit me then that it wasn't about the tarts or the bakery or anything I did. It was that nothing I offered could land anymore. She wasn't even seeing me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how many small rejections had stacked up over the years. They weren't loud, but they were steady, brick after brick, until there was a wall between us that neither of us seemed willing to tear down. That night, I dreamt of her from years ago, laughing at some stupid joke I'd made, curling into my side during a storm. I woke up feeling the ache of missing something that technically still existed, just not in the same form. The next morning, over coffee, I asked if everything was okay between us. She sipped her cup, stared out the window, and said, "We're fine. Why?" Her tone wasn't defensive, it was indifferent, which somehow felt worse. I wanted to press to say, "We're not fine and you know it." But instead I nodded and let the moment pass. I was starting to realize that having the conversation I wanted might mean facing an answer I wasn't ready to hear. So we went on like that. Two people sharing a roof, bills, and a bed, but not much else. From the outside, we probably looked stable. Inside, I was quietly keeping score of all the moments we'd stopped being us. It was early spring when the thought first crossed my mind. Not as a threat, not even as a plan, just a quiet whisper. Maybe I can't do this forever. It came while I was sitting in my truck outside the hardware store, hands resting on the wheel, realizing I was in no rush to get home. That scared me. Home used to be my favorite place, the place I'd go to recharge. Now it felt like walking into a room where the air was always heavy, where you had to measure every word and step. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that all couples go through seasons like this. But deep down, I knew we'd been stuck in the same season for years. One Saturday afternoon, I overheard her laughing on the phone in the backyard. I couldn't make out the words, but the sound of her voice, bright, alive, was like hearing a ghost. She didn't sound like that with me anymore. I stood at the window longer than I should have, wondering who got that version of her now. When she came back inside, I asked who she'd been talking to. She said, "Just a friend," and changed the subject before I could ask more. It wasn't suspicion that hit me then. It was the realization that she had whole conversations, whole pieces of her life that didn't include me at all. I tried to imagine what it would be like if we separated. The thought made my stomach twist, but so did the idea of living like this for another 10 or 20 years. It wasn't about anger or betrayal. It was about the slow erosion of something that once felt unshakable. That night, lying in bed, I found myself on my phone, looking at rental listings. Not seriously, at least that's what I told myself. But I bookmarked a few, almost without thinking. A one-bedroom near the river, another above a small coffee shop downtown, places that smelled like a fresh start. In the days that followed, I started paying more attention to the moments when I felt lighter, grabbing a beer with a friend after work, talking to the guy at the lumberyard about fishing, driving with the windows down and the music up. Those moments reminded me I was still in there somewhere. And once you realize you're happier outside your own home than inside it, it's hard to unsee. That whisper in my head started coming back more often, a little louder each time. Maybe it's time. The decision didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It was more like a series of small, quiet clicks in my head. A Tuesday evening when she walked past me without saying hello. A Sunday morning when she left for errands and came back 6 hours later without explanation. A dinner where we didn't speak a single word until the plates were empty. One night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and almost didn't recognize the man staring back. My eyes looked tired, my shoulders were slouched, and there was this constant dull heaviness in my chest. I thought, if this is what the rest of my life is going to feel like, I don't want it. I don't want. The next day, I called an old friend I hadn't spoken to in months. We met for coffee, and somewhere between talking about fishing trips and old jobs, I heard myself say, I think I'm done. It surprised me, hearing it out loud. My friend just nodded, like he'd been expecting it. That evening, I went home and sat at the kitchen table, waiting for her. When she walked in, I told her we needed to talk. She sighed, like she already knew where it was going. I said I didn't think we were happy anymore. Either of us. She stared at me for a long moment and finally said, yeah, you're right. No tears, no shouting, just two people quietly acknowledging what had been obvious for years. We agreed to handle it without lawyers at first. No one was trying to hurt the other. We just wanted out. Over the next week, we divided up the furniture, the dishes, the pictures. It was strange, touching things that had been part of us and realizing they were about to belong to you or me. I found a small apartment near the river, the one I'd bookmarked weeks earlier. The landlord handed me the keys, and I remember standing in the empty living room, hearing the echo of my own footsteps. It felt both lonely and liberating. Moving out didn't feel like running away. It felt like stepping out of a room where the windows had been shut for too long. I didn't hate her. I didn't even blame her entirely. But I knew I couldn't keep living half asleep. That night, I slept on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by boxes with the sound of the river faint through the window. For the first time in years, I fell asleep, without that heavy weight in my chest. The first week in the new place felt strange. I'd wake up and need a moment to remember where I was. The silence was different here. Clean, almost peaceful, but also a little too big. No sound of her moving around in the kitchen, no soft clinking of mugs, no voice calling my name from the other room, just me and the hum of the fridge. I unpacked slowly, one box at a time. There was no rush, nobody to tell me where things should go. No shared opinions on decor. At first, the freedom felt good. I could eat dinner at midnight if I wanted, leave tools on the counter, blast music without headphones. But sometimes I'd catch myself turning to say something to her, only to remember she wasn't there. Friends tried to keep me busy. Dinners, fishing trips, helping them with house projects. I said yes to most of it, not because I was desperate for company, but because sitting alone too long made the walls feel closer. On Friday night, I made spaghetti and set the table for two out of habit. I didn't notice until I was about to plate the food. I left the extra plate there anyway, not sure if it was nostalgia or just muscle memory. I started taking long walks by the river after work. The water moved steadily, no matter the weather, and something about that calmed me. Life kept going, even when parts of it fell apart. Occasionally, I'd get a text from Lauren. Practical stuff about mail, a bill, or a piece of furniture she realized was still mine. The messages were short and polite, like we were distant acquaintances. I never asked how she was, and she never asked me. Nights were the hardest. That's when the memories slipped in. The good ones, not the fights or the silences. I'd think about the road trips, the inside jokes, the way she used to fall asleep on my chest. Missing her wasn't the same as wanting her back, but it still hit deep. Some mornings, I'd look out at the sunrise from my tiny balcony and feel a flicker of hope. The kind that whispers, maybe, eventually, I'll fill this space with something new. But for now, I was still learning how to live with the empty spaces she left behind. By the second month, the apartment started to feel less like a stopgap and more like mine. The smell of fresh coffee in the mornings, the sound of the river through the open window at night, these little things began to stitch themselves into a new kind of routine. I bought a used armchair from a thrift store, the kind you sink into and don't want to leave. Set it by the window, next to a small lamp. That corner became my spot. I'd read there, or just sit with music playing low, watching the city lights blink on in the distance. I started cooking again, not because I had to feed anyone else, but because I wanted to. Sunday mornings were for omelets and pancakes, the smell filling the place until it felt alive. I even tried new recipes, messing them up sometimes, laughing to myself when the smoke alarm went off. Work felt different too. I had more focus, more patience. I wasn't rushing home to walk into tension, and that made the days lighter. I even took on a few side projects, restoring an old table for a neighbor, building shelves for a local bookstore. People noticed the change. Friends said I seemed more here, more present. I caught myself smiling without forcing it, laughing without checking if it was the right time. It felt like parts of me that had gone dormant were waking up again. One evening, I joined a community art class on a whim. It was messy, loud, and full of strangers, but it gave me something to look forward to. I wasn't there to meet anyone, but I still found myself talking, sharing stories, swapping phone numbers with people I'd never have crossed paths with before. The nights weren't as heavy anymore. Sure, there were still quiet moments when I thought about the past, but they didn't drag me under like before. I could see them for what they were. Chapters, not chains. Somewhere in all that, I realized I wasn't just moving on from her. I was moving towards something else, even if I didn't know exactly what it was yet. And for the first time in a long while, that uncertainty felt exciting instead of scary. It happened on a Thursday evening, one of those crisp nights when the air smells faintly of wood smoke. I'd stopped by the bookstore where I'd built those shelves, planning to drop off a small repair kit for the owner. She waved me toward the back, where a small crowd had gathered for a poetry reading. I thought about slipping out, but instead I stayed, leaning against the wall with my hands in my pockets. The room was warm, the light soft, and the voices from the stage filled the air like music. People were laughing, nodding, leaning in. It felt alive. That's when I noticed her, standing near the front, holding a cup of tea, listening like every word mattered. She wasn't the kind of beautiful that makes you stop in your tracks, but the kind that makes you want to keep looking. During the break, we ended up next to each other at the counter where they were serving cookies. She made a joke about how the oatmeal ones were just imposters for chocolate chip, and I laughed, really laughed. It wasn't forced, it wasn't polite, it was the kind that feels like it comes from somewhere you'd almost forgotten. We talked for a few minutes about books, about the river, about how small the city feels sometimes. Nothing deep, nothing loaded, just easy conversation. But when she smiled, I caught myself wanting to see it again. As I left, she called after me, "Hey, maybe I'll see you here next time." I nodded, feeling that flicker in my chest again. Not the ache of missing something, but the spark of finding something new. Walking home, I realized I wasn't thinking about Lauren. I wasn't thinking about the past at all. My mind was on the sound of her laugh, the way the light had caught in her hair, and the possibility, small, quiet, but real, that maybe I was ready for the next chapter. That night, the river sounded different, or maybe it was just me. Either way, I fell asleep knowing I'd finally stepped all the way out of the old life and into whatever came next.